Welcome to week 4 of Explore the Bible. Today we continue in the book of 1 Kings. We're picking up here. Solomon has died, and now what's going to happen to the kingdom. And we've seen, the sin that he had and what God has said about what Solomon did and how that's going to affect what happens in the future for the nation of Israel. Here we begin to see this lived out. His son is starting to take over the reign, and we'll see what happens when he gets there. Before we dive into 1 Kings, be sure and subscribe to our channel, like, comment, ask questions, share it with others. We appreciate that as much as you'll do it, because that helps us grow our channel, reach more folks, and that's what we want to do, is try to share the gospel and share God's truth as much as we can. So we appreciate you doing that. Appreciate you teaching as well. Let's look at 1 Kings chapter 12. Then King Rehoboam, this is Solomon's son, Rehoboam. Okay, there's two guys going to come up here, Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Jeroboam is the son of a servant of Solomon, but Rehoboam is Solomon's son. Then King Rehoboam consulted with elders who had served his father Solomon when he was alive, asking, "How do you advise me to respond to this people?" They replied, "Today, if you will be a servant to this people and serve them, and if you respond to them by speaking kind words to them, they will be your servants forever." Okay, so it looks like he's starting out good, right? He's going to go to the elders, the ones who had served Solomon. They had done well serving Solomon, and he says, "I'm going to ask for your advice. What do you think? How do I need to go about responding to the people? What do you think I ought to do?" This is good, right? Go to the people with experience. Go to those wise people that you know, those people who've done it before, and ask their opinion. What do you think? How should I do? And look at what they say. I love this counsel that they give, just because of the way they couch the terms. They're speaking to the king, and they tell the king, "Today, if you will be a servant to this people and serve them, and respond to them by speaking kind words to them, they will be your servants forever." So if you'll serve them, that is, if you'll help them, if you'll be kind to them, if you'll act in ways that help them be who you want them to be, if you'll act in a way that points them towards the kind of people they ought to be, and upholds for them the opportunity to be those people, then they'll follow you anywhere. They'll go wherever you want to go. They'll be your servants forever. You'll serve them. This word servant to this people, and serve them. They tell the king, serve the people, be kind to the people, and the people will serve you forever. Well, what does Rehoboam think about this? But he rejected the advice of the elders who had advised him, and consulted with the young men who'd grown up with him and attended him. And he asked them, "What message do you advise that we send back to this people?" He said to me, "Lighten the yoke your father put on us." So the people have said, "Hey, it's been hard under Solomon." Now we know, right, that as Solomon aged in his life and he gets deeper into his life, he begins to reject the wisdom of God, the wisdom that God had given him so freely, that comes out in books of Proverbs, that comes out in Ecclesiastes and the Song of Songs. This wisdom that we see from Solomon, Solomon begins to basically reject that, to live a life in opposition to that. Right, and so now the people, when Solomon's dead, they're like, "Man, going to the new king, lighten the load." So the new king's spoken to the elders and asked them, but he didn't like that advice. I can see how the king would reject the advice to say, "Why don't you be a servant? And if you'll serve the people, they'll serve you." The king didn't like that. That wasn't what he wanted to hear. To be kind to them, he didn't want to hear that. So he goes to the young men who had grown up with him and attended him. So he goes to his circle, his friends, right? The people that had lived the life that he had lived, a life of ease, a life of pleasure, a life of selfishness, a life of commitment to himself and not to God. And he says, "Hey guys, what do y'all think? What do y'all think we ought to do? These people have said, lighten the yoke. What do y'all think? These guys said I need to serve them and be nice to them. What do you think?" Then the young men who had grown up with him told him, "This is what you should say to this people who said to you, 'Your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us.' This is what you should tell them. 'My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Although my father burdened you with a heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with barbed whips.'" A little bit opposite advice, isn't it? This, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. You thought my dad was bad, you just wait. You thought he was hard, you just wait, because I'm fixing to show you what hard is. This is their counsel, right? These young men. You don't beat them with whips, you beat them with barbed whips. You go hard. You don't go easy. Don't be nice to them. These are your servants, and you need to put the hammer down on these people. Now, there is something to say here about who we seek counsel from, who we listen to, and how we discern who we should listen to, and where wisdom lies, right? Where that wisdom comes from. And one of the things that you see here is this idea of I've got to prove myself. I've got to show you that I am worse, stronger, bigger, better, harder, whatever the phrase you want to use, than my father. I've got to make sure you understand that you had it easy under him, and it's going to be really, you thought that was bad, you just wait. This counsel comes to him, and Rehoboam likes it. I like that. It speaks to his ego. It strokes his ego. It strokes his concept of exerting power and putting a thumb on people. That let's just go ahead and push them when they're down. He rejected the older men who not always are wiser, but often are wiser. For the young men who he couldn't discern. They want in, right? They don't want to be these people. They want to be the ones whipping these people. And so they're going to stroke the ego, and they're going to tell him what he wants to hear and what he likes to hear. They're going to make him feel like we believe in you to the point that you're better than all of these people. You're better than your father was, and they're going to speak to the worst parts of him. And that's who he listens to. Then the king answered the people harshly. He rejected the advice the elders had given him and spoke to them according to the young men's advice. My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with barbed whips. He said, I like that. That's what we're going with. We're going hard. We're going to make it as terrible for them as we can. When all Israel saw that the king had not listened to them, the people answered him. Now here's the deal, right? He didn't expect that the people had agency too, that the people could make decisions for themselves. He expected that I'll tell them what's going to happen, and then they're just going to fall in line because that's what they do. But the people said, no, I don't think so, right? What portion do we have in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. Israel, return to your tents. David, now look after your own house. So Israel went to their tents, but Rehoboam reigned over the Israelites living in the cities of Judah. Okay, here's what happens. The 10 nations, or the 10 tribes that aren't Judah or Levi, the 10 tribes say, I don't think so. This is not for us. What have we ever gotten? We're not getting anything out of this. This is not good for us. Why should we follow this descendant of David? Who is he? What's the good in this for us? David, y'all take care of yourselves, and we'll just go do our own thing. It's at this moment that the nation splits. And what we think of as north and south, or it's also called Israel, is what these other ones, and Judah. Israel went to their tents, and the cities of Judah, the single tribe, the tribe of David, they have their own. And so Rehoboam is left with just one tribe, and that's the largest and has the largest landmass of them, but it's just one out of the 12. The 10 of them, you've got Levi that's spread out all over there, the priestly class, right? But you've got the 10 that say, no, we're out of this. We're leaving. And it splits. And Rehoboam is left reigning over the Israelites to live in the cities of Judah. He's just reigning over Judah. That's all he's got left. And then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was in charge of forced labor. But all Israel stoned him to death, and King Rehoboam managed to get into the chariot and flee to Jerusalem. Israel is still in rebellion against the house of David today. Excuse me, he said, well, you can't leave. He goes after him, right? He sends his army, right? We're going to go down there. This guy that runs the forced labor, these are his people. But he sees them as slaves, the forced labor, and we're gonna take care of them. And no, they reject that, and he basically escapes with his life. He flees to Jerusalem. He goes back home to Jerusalem, and that just barely with his life. And Israel splits. This whole thing about who do you listen to, where do you get your counsel, and how do you see things? How do you see people? How do you treat people? And how do we understand ourselves and understand the ego that we have and our own personal desire to have that ego stroked, and realizing that there are some people who will be around us who will stroke that ego, that will make us feel better about ourselves, not because it's right, but because they're trying to get in with us, and it's wrong. Listen to wisdom, know wisdom so you can hear wisdom. Right? If you don't know what wisdom sounds like, then you don't know when you're hearing it, right? He didn't know what wisdom sounded like, unfortunately. I hope that's helped as you study this passage, as you teach it. Be sure and like, subscribe, comment. If you've got questions, ask your questions on in the comment section. We'll try to answer them best we can. Share it with others. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.